Good morning. This morning, I wanted to briefly tell you about a friend of mine named Dave, a really close friend. We've spent a lot of time together over the years, share a lot of interests, good friends, lots of deep conversations. He's in Cape Town. And over the years, as I've known Dave, so this is going back maybe 10, 15 years or so, I've seen some of his health conditions worsen. He's got chronic issues that they have to just call AS because it's too long of a name to have to pronounce, and liver damage and pain. And meanwhile, he's leading a church and is married and has adopted children, and so somehow manages to live life while going on very significant, really actually debilitating health issues that have gotten worse and worse over the years, and then have actually been really exacerbated by COVID. Not having COVID, but just all the requirements of staying in and wearing masks and not being able to move and these kinds of things. And I thought of Dave this morning, and this will come as I speak a little bit too, because Dave is probably one of the first people in my life who I was close to, who had such significant health issues that I couldn't help anymore, or I felt like I couldn't or can't help anymore. And I've come to see that Dave's not the only Dave in my life, but probably like many of you, and knowing enough about many of you, I have others in my life who also actually have quite similar, although different needs, have health issues that are so significant that it affects their life. Maybe some of you are in a similar situation. And living in different contexts as I have, I've also met people with other kinds of needs that seem so overwhelming, maybe not a physical ailment, but other kinds of needs that I feel like I've got nothing to give, nothing to contribute. And so my propensity is then to really kind of just stop paying attention because it's too much for me. So I want to use that this morning as we speak. And so maybe you know, and maybe you are someone who has lost everything, or someone close to you, someone who's endured something horrific, so horrific that all sorts of little things remind you of that. I think that's true for many people in this room and around us. Someone in agonizing grief. We were reminded this morning in hearing from Lynette about the people that she's working with, many refugees, people escaping war, abuse. So I think as I say those things, none of those hopefully are completely foreign to us. I think we probably all, at least somewhere in there, have a place or a person that we identify with. So the question is, and that we bring up this morning, is what is your reaction? How do you or I help? What would you do in these kinds of situations? For many of us, it's write a card or make a casserole, start a GoFundMe, give a call, message on Facebook, make a donation, bring a plant, open up your home, give them the space they need, tell them they're there if you need it. Sometimes it's even just kind of avoiding. I know that's true for me. Partially because I'm a habitual fixer. I think generally motivated by the good desire to make things better, to wrong rights, to help people. The question I have grown up asking first and foremost is, how can I help? How can I fix the situation? And maybe on a more subtle or subconscious level, how can I fix this person? I like to think that I'm a thinker. So I will assess the situation and look at the variables and try to intervene upstream, so to speak, at the cause of the problem. Well, I mean, maybe you, as you're hearing that, would think the same thing that I hear quite often from my wife, which is, stop. When I'm asking, what's the bigger picture here? What's really going on? 100% of the time, she says to me, stop. Not because she doesn't want help, but because in looking for the bigger problem, I'm missing her. So she's there in front of me and I'm looking around to see, yeah, but what's really happening? What's the deeper, more significant thing? And I miss her right in front of me. I'm working on this. Because I always think there's something that can be done, something I can do. But what about in the situations where there is nothing we can do? Maybe the situation is way beyond us. Maybe it's not something that just goes away. It's chronic pain, it's trauma, it's poverty. There's not an easy and quick solution. And sometimes someone doesn't actually want us to do anything. So we looked to this Job text for our guidance this morning. It's just a few short verses, actually, in a long and excellent book, really. And the story that's picked for us is of Job's 3 friends hearing of his troubles. Important context here, if you're familiar with the story or not. In the previous verses, in the part of the story before what we read this morning, Job had lost nearly everything he owned. His entire livelihood was gone to natural disaster and theft. Okay, that's pretty significant. His children had died tragically. He was suffering extreme physical ailments. This all comes before the part we read. Trauma, grief, loss. So this text this morning takes one part of the longer story and focuses on Job's friend. And so that's friends, and that's where we're looking this morning, because they heard of his troubles and agreed to visit and comfort him. Good. They did not bring, you'll notice, replacement livestock for him. They didn't come and do a barn raising for him. They didn't send a letter of condolence to him. What did they do? It says in the part that Marlis read, in their great sorrow, they tore their clothes, then sprinkled dust on their heads and cried bitterly. For 7 days and nights, they sat silently on the ground beside him because they realized what terrible pain he was in. I just want to point out a few things in their response. First, they responded with emotion, a level of emotion that matched Job's. Weeping aloud and tearing their clothes, offering him an outward manifestation that his trauma was real and worthy of the feelings of the moment. Then we read that Job's friends sat with him for days, it says, and witnessed with their presence the incredible weight and trauma. There was a solidarity with Job, sitting with him. Now, depending on who you are, maybe you're like me, that either or both of those is terrifying. The need for emotional engagement, feelings. I grew up where that was not valued. Fixing things was valued. Oh, no, I'm going to keep my distance through an intellectual-only response. Is that what Job needed? Or we're frightened of the need to go into the pit with that person. I want to throw a rope kind of from the distance and hope they can catch the rope and pull them out kind of as far away as possible. Maybe both of those are scary to us. Probably both of those are scary to many of us. And I was thinking about this, that really, those two things, that's kind of what we would call empathy. Acknowledging someone's real pain and staying with them there. They responded with empathy. That's pretty good. In the Old Testament, we get empathy. Their response is not driven by what they had decided was needed, but instead by what Job needed. Which brings us to this question of our series this morning: what do you need? It's written on the paper outside. Lynn mentioned it. It goes right along with empathy, of asking, of listening. So this is what I, as a well-intentioned fixer, I need to ask more. While I've been working on this sermon, I've been asking this more over the past few weeks. Because asking, what do you need? It means I see you. You. What do you need? It gives power to that person. It lets them decide and describe and choose what they need. So you'll notice the question is not, what can I do for you? I'm trying to learn to ask the one and not the other. The question is, what do you need? I'm letting go of my preconceived notions of what help looks like. There's a book probably many of you are familiar with, When Helping Hurts. It's entirely about this kind of work and how it goes cross-culturally and in places where there's imbalances of power and need. I am not deciding. You, the one who is hurting, you get to say what you need. And they might say a long list of things. So in the scripture that Al read for us, Paul was in prison. He wrote this long list of things that he needed. Do this, say this, tell this person that. Sometimes that's the response that we get. You might say something that I don't like. I might ask you, what do you need? Thinking maybe you want a cup of water and you want something else. Or it's something I can't easily provide. I think this is one of the main reasons that we don't do it, because they might actually answer the question and we are not really prepared for what they might say. And sometimes people in hurt don't know what to say. This has been my experience with many people who are grieving. In a place of grieving, I don't have the capacity to tell you what I need. I'm grieving. Okay, but I have to ask. As I started preparing for this morning, using this question, my thought was, this is my first thoughts. So does this mean we can never help anyone? I mean, the Bible seems to be full of lots of instructions for helping people and caring for people. God seems to be one who reaches out continually. Jesus? I don't think so. We will love neighbors, feed widows, care for orphans, clothe the needy, take in refugees. But we must do these things after or in response to seeing the reality of their situation, seeing them as people, acknowledging their pain and asking, what do you need? Then we love, then we help. So a few thoughts, lastly, on how we live this way from one who admittedly is learning. It starts, as I said, by looking around, by paying attention, by listening, by choosing not to ignore those who are hurting. I say this knowing it's not easy. None of those things are easy. Because it means facing our own issues and fears and inadequacies, the reasons that we don't want to get involved because we know that it will cost me too, our cultural conditioning of how we help and the value of people. When we ask someone, what do you need? We lose the protection of saying, I didn't know. I will add, I think that you're not obligated to meet every need someone then gives to us. It can be overwhelming. It's okay to have boundaries, to have limits to what we can do. There are others who also can be part of helping, so you and you alone are not the only one who needs to fix or help or save. You don't need to be a Messiah to anyone. I don't need to be that. I think that's part of the work of the Spirit and community to say, I've been with this person. They've expressed this need. I don't know what to do. What should I do? What can we do? It also involves being vulnerable, maybe the most scary thing I've said in this sermon. Saying, I'm hurting, someone saying I'm hurting isn't easy. For most of us, it's not easy to tell others that we are hurting. Similarly, it's not easy to hear someone say, I'm hurting. It's normal to also feel sad when someone is sad, to hurt when someone is hurting. It's good, it's human. It's the empathy that we talked about. And I've learned that saying, I'm really sorry, that sounds awful, or some equivalent word. Acknowledging is really a good place to start. I wonder what might be modern equivalents of rending one's clothing and scattering ashes to express lament and deep grief. I have to save that question for this morning, but I think that's such a relevant question. And what does it mean for us? What do we as a community do? What does my family do? What do I do? And at the same time, I would say that silence is okay when we're with someone. We don't have to fill every second with nervous chatter, mostly to deal with our own discomfort of the situation. Silence is okay when we give presence. And often there's not anything we can really say anyhow, except I'm here. That's okay. I love this song. This line just stuck out to me. Say no words, it is too soon. Say no words out loud. But wrap your quiet arms around and hide us in your cloud. That's what I mean. I think those of us who are children, who have been children, who have other relationships know that sometimes a hug is actually the best thing. Not any words with the hug, not any fix, just being there. So I would challenge us to gift one another and others with presence. I think for many of us, that may be one of the most difficult things. Making time, being with. I don't make enough time in my week for that sort of thing. This week I had a few good moments, and they were the best moments of my week, were being with different people. And finally, this question must guide us, I think, as a church, because in order to minister to one another, before we do outreach or try to help our neighbors or work with Head Start, when we pray for one another, we start by asking, what do you need? I love, Lynn, that you asked that of Lynette. Rather than just praying for her, we actually asked her, what do you need? I believe this question can be so powerful in transforming our relationships, our ministry, our experience of God, and ourselves. And so I leave us sitting with that question. May it be so.